You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
Welcome to the Pitch Talks podcast, a chance for you to hear from individuals who work in sport and how you can pursue a similar path. Today's guest and the episode is something a little bit different, as we are joined by Mark Hawkins, a former Team GB handball athlete and now coach.
Welcome to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
So welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Sam. Thanks for having me, Mitch. It's going to be interesting, I hope.
Just to dive straight in, Mark, you're currently first team coach for a Norwegian sort of Premier League handball side. Am I correct?
Close, yeah. I mean, we're second division side here in Norway. We're sort of a second team, feeder team to an elite club who, they've been sort of in the Champions League and third place in the Champions League a couple of years ago. So the elite side's on a high level, and we're hopefully developing players and pushing players into that team, which we've had a bit of success with in the last couple of years.
Just to sort of boil it down, on a day-to-day basis, for someone that doesn't know handball, that doesn't know sort of take it from a sort of a footballing point of view, how does your day-to-day line up with what we would compare to a similar level football club?
In terms of sort of handball, I suppose some of it is a little bit behind in terms of it's not fully, I say it's not fully professional, it is fully professional, especially in the first team, the elite team. They're all full-time professionals, but because the wages, the salaries aren't as such of football, is that most of them, or especially the younger players, are still studying and things like that. So training sort of times and sort of a daily schedule is a little bit adapted to that. A lot of my players are, in fact, all of my players are studying. So they'll be training sort of in their sports schools and elite sort of systems in the morning, where they do a lot of the strength training and physical training and things like that. And then they'll be with me every evening, and then they do the club stuff with us as well. So that's my side with the second division and sort of younger players and developmental players. In sort of difference to football, especially at this level, we don't have a strength coach and analyst. It's like, I'm all of them. I'm everything in that sort of sense.
You're the jack of all trades.
Exactly. And then, but obviously with the first team, there is, a specialist strength coach and et cetera. So, it's a little bit age and stage now at the moment with COVID stuff. I have to, get reports in every morning from the players with their, any symptoms and this sort of stuff, and, any symptoms with their families or anyone they're living with and things like that. So it's very much in the job as well at the moment.
Has added an additional few job responsibilities as well as complications, I can imagine.
Yeah.
This is Pitch Talks.
So sort of next, I wanted to go right back to the start of your handball journey. Where did that start? Because a lot of people, in the UK may have experienced it a little bit at school, whereas you look at, you compare it to the rest of Europe, it is one of the main sports that everyone plays. How did you get involved in handball as a kid?
Well, I didn't get involved in handball until I was 21. So I came through the talent transfer program run by UK Sport, Sporting Giants. And so, I was a basketball player up until I was 21, sort of through university and youth leagues and things like that. And then got the chance, as I was pretty much finishing uni, offered a chance to trial in this sort of sporting X Factor sort of thing they did, as they called it at the time. And so I was one of originally I think they selected 11 out of several thousand applicants and several hundred that they took to original trial days, and then sort of gradually whittled down. I think there's 11 of us that were taken onto the program, and I was one of 4 that made it all the way through until the Olympics.
For those people who perhaps don't know the sport of handball, is it possible for you to be able to summarise what the sport is, the objectives, how many aside, just the real basics?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for the layman, it looks a bit like water polo, but without the water. We're 7 aside, 1 goalkeeper, 6 court players on a court which is bigger, about 10 to 12 metres longer than a basketball court. And then, field hockey sort of size and shape goals, and, passing the ball between each other, trying to tackle and prevent each other, and then the attack team's obviously trying to throw it into the goal past the goalkeeper, and we're attack and defend style like basketball. But yeah, that's probably the best I can give you after years of having to answer that question.
Personally, having sat in a similar position, not as anywhere near as prestigious as yourself, Mark, but having to answer that question repeatedly, it's water polo without the water was my by far and away favourite term, because it just confuses people. They go, well, what? But then actually, when you think about it, it is handball is actually water polo minus the water. I think the great thing about it is the transferable skills from as you've alluded to already, basketball, hockey, football, cricket, even when you think about actually physically catching a ball. For someone who's got the handball bug is why it is such a great sport.
You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
Then sort of fast forwarding on to where you've actually mentioned already, representing Team GB. How did that feel to say that you have represented your country at an Olympic Games?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy looking back on it now. It feels almost like watching someone else or thinking about someone else now, sort of looking back on it. But it was just, I'm from in between London and Brighton, so about 45 minutes south of London. So basically, my hometown, home city, to be able to compete in the Olympics there was just the most incredible situation. And the Olympics as a whole, in a typically British way, was there was lots of negativity in the build up, or how's it going to go? Is it going to go? And then for it to turn into just such a amazing spectacle for 2.5 or for a month or so, and then even the sun was shining. We joked that we got all this wet weather gear, we didn't have to wear it. It was just, everything was amazing about it, and the feel good factor about it, and the amount of people after the Olympics have just said, that we had the best time watching it. Like, just to be in the middle of it must have been amazing. And people, the Premier League will start, don't want to watch the Premier League, I want to watch the Olympics. It was just, everything about it was just incredible, and it's get goosebumps just thinking about it and talking about it again.
I, for one, was getting into handball at the time, and having that there to watch was just amazing. Having played it at school, the sort of 6 weeks leading up to the summer holidays when the Olympics were, and then having the Olympics to go and watch was just amazing. So yeah, sort of from the other side of the fence, looking through the TV to see Team GB at the Olympic Games playing handball for the first time ever was amazing.
You think for us for handball, that was always what it was, such a huge thing for us, and billed as to us is that we, this was a chance for us to show our sport to Britain, because we all played and we all lived abroad in the years up before the Olympics, and even the week, it's a month before the Olympics. So all our training was in Europe. We only came back to Loughborough, to the holding camp, 10 days or so before the Olympics. So we had no real sort of feel for the build-up. But like you say, for us to be able to expose our sport to the British public was huge. And it went from, before the Olympics, it would be, if you tell people you played handball, it was, what is that? And you explain the water polo and things like that. And then, is that the one where you hit it over a net and stuff like that, or things like that? Or, oh yeah, I saw that on Eurosport once. Then after the Olympics, it was like, oh yeah, I watched that in the Olympics, it was amazing. Or, people knew it. It was in the public consciousness, which was huge.
You're listening to Pitch Talks.
Just being an athlete within the Olympics, how much other access did you have to what else was going on?
So, yeah, we were competing. Our first game, I think, was on the second day. We had the opening ceremony, then we had a rest day, then we played. So we were straight into competition. And again, for the first couple of days, we arrived before the opening ceremony, was a bit sort of surreal, and the build up, and it's still, nobody really, it's still sort of waiting to go. And then when you're competing, you're completely in a bubble, sort of mentally and like physically, literally in the sort of village. And so it was speaking a little bit with family and friends and things like that. You got a bit of a thing that they were, telling us stories that, they'd be, after they come and watch the games, they go out and have a meal in the city, and like all the the electronic shots were just shut, it was all on the TVs and you couldn't escape it. And we didn't feel really any of that to start with. We could feel the atmosphere in the park. And then it was only after we finished competing, there was another sort of week there where we could go and see some of the other events, or we actually, you left the sort of the park or the village a little bit, and when you felt the atmosphere, and that was something. Possibly could have been a bit overwhelming if you'd experienced that beforehand, but it was incredible.
Bump into any sort of notables?
Yeah, I mean, Usain Bolt came into the canteen. It was like an American high school film, and he walked in and everybody turned and cameras out and things like that, and you think, that's amongst all the best athletes on the planet, and he's still sort of revered like that. So that was a bit surreal. We had coffee with Ryan Giggs and Craig Bellamy on the day of the opening ceremony and stuff like that, and just little things like that became, that's never normal. You have to pinch yourself, but you would see people all the time. As a sports fan or, an absolute sports nut, if I hadn't been competing, I would have been watching everything on the TV, wall to wall for 2.5 weeks. So, a lot of them, you're looking around you just like all your idols, and things like that. It's bizarre, really.
I think I actually remember listening to an interview with Usain Bolt to say that the morning of the 100-meter final, he had chicken nuggets from McDonald's, and just like, wow, you can run that quick after. I can barely walk upstairs after eating 8 chicken nuggets.
This is Pitch Talks.
Where were you when you found out that you were going to be competing for GB?
Well, we were on our preparation in Serbia. We were in this little mountain village called Koponik. So it's at the bottom of sort of a ski resort. We were in the middle of nowhere, sort of running up hills, and there's a handball hall and a lot of hills, and that was basically what we did for a few weeks up until the Olympics. They'd selected sort of a wider group, a long list. I think they had to name 28 a couple of months before, and then it gets down to 14 plus one travelling reserve that goes with you. So yeah, and that would have been maybe only a month or 6 weeks before the game, so they actually selected the squad itself that was going to play. So it was at I think it was in the sort of basement meeting room of this sort of hotel, which we were the only people staying in this sort of deserted ski resort. Remember it well. I think I was the first called in to the meeting room. It was, just all of a sudden, just in this sort of most inconspicuous of settings. It was just that I'd be there. So that was, remember it well, actually.
I was going to say, that's probably a memory you'll never forget.
Yeah, a feeling as well that I'll never forget. It was just, obviously, we have to stay fit. We have to stay informed. If you're injured, someone else comes in and replaces you and things like that. So it's an amazing feeling to, okay, I'm in at the moment, so I've got to be taken out, but also you can't stop then. That's when, you have to keep going even harder. And it's all those sort of emotions are just, a bit difficult to describe.
You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
On Pitch Talks today, we're joined by Mark Hawkins on his journey as a former Team GB handball athlete. So far we've covered your experiences being selected and leading up to the Olympics. And now I want to talk about what you're doing a lot more today. So that's coaching. Was this always a plan of yours to go into coaching? Did you think about it whilst you were playing, what was going to be happening next for you?
Yes and no. I've always coached. When I was a youth basketball player, I think I was 18, I was coaching the under-14 team. And, when I went to university, I studied sports science, and part of that was coaching. And I coached some of the, younger teams in sort of linked to the local club as well. So I'd always done some. When it came to handball, obviously I turned into a complete novice overnight from sort of basketball, where I had a bit of a clue what I was doing. I'd done a couple of coaching badges up to level 2 or something, and then obviously we moved to Denmark. I was playing there, didn't speak the language. So, I couldn't just go and coach local clubs and things like that. So it took a bit of a backseat for a while until really finished playing and came back to England. And then there was, after the Olympics, there was a great deal more demand for schools to be doing coaching and things like that. And bunch of us guys who just come back from Europe who weren't doing much else at the time. It was, the federation was sort of asking us to go in and could we coach these schools and things like that. So, and Carl Sholton Titans in South London is where I was based fairly close to. They had what was then the ACE and now the DICE program based there. And they had a good PE teacher, Brendan Early, who had done a lot of the handball and sort of built it up in the school. And EHA asked me to go in and sort of do a little bit, and I gradually sort of formed a relationship there and sort of just carried on doing it. And, fairly quickly they asked me to help out with some of the youth England teams and so on and so forth. And it just really progressed from there. And I think it was a matter of circumstance that I was available and I was local and things like that, that I arrived at it at that moment. I think I probably would have always gone into it in a certain aspect or time frame or whatever, but that was how I sort of landed in it at that moment, really.
Yeah, it sort of leads me on to my next question, how you went from being, was it under 18s boys national team coach?
Yeah.
Was that sort of the first national job? Was there any sort of experiences before that, apart from with the Carl Shorten guys, or was that sort of the first one that you got with the BHA?
Yeah, I'd done with the EHA, I'd done the under 16s, a sort of national academy sort of stuff there. And then I went on to do the under 18 and took them through to the under 20s. And that was the first where, I was head coach at a more serious or a higher level. I'd helped out a little bit with some of the previous under 18, under 20 groups that had gone through, but that was my first one, sort of taking it on myself.
Just now moving on to where you are now, with the fact that it is such a big sport in Europe, and I think, am I right in saying it's the second biggest male participation sport in the whole of Europe, or something like that, and the largest female participation sport in Europe? Yeah,
I think that's certainly close enough.
Just obviously on top of that, being from the UK and having the stigma of it not being that big, did you ever feel sort of extra pressure to prove yourself? This both whilst playing and now whilst coaching, because of the fact you were UK based and that we don't have this massive history of competing at the top level in handball? Yeah,
absolutely. I think especially, myself and Chris McDermott, we went out to play in Iceland the year before the Olympics, and people within sort of the handball community in Europe knew there was going to be a Great Britain team, but pretty much every time you went to a new club, Chris had been to Slovenia the year before. In Denmark, the project in Aarhus, where we'd been, had been going for a bit longer, so people were aware of that. But you'd often land in a new, or players would go and play in France or wherever they ended up, Germany, and they'd always be the first British players to be playing in these leagues, and people hadn't come across many or any British players before, or very few if they had. And so it was, when we played in Iceland, they play football through the summer, handball through the winter. So handball is one of, it's on TV, it's known about. And our coach was telling, they put an article out on the BBC Sport that, I'd signed for this club in Iceland, and within about half an hour, the news had got back to Iceland, and it was in the newspaper in Iceland. It was on, stuff like that as well. But it had been because I came from basketball, and the BBC article talked about my experience in basketball. Like, one of the other coaches in the league phoned my coach and just says, "It says you've just signed a basketball player from England. What are you thinking about?" and things like that. So it was, things like that we were always a bit of a curiosity that, people would want, were asking, like, how the English guys doing. You were judged as almost a collective instead of an individual. There's some people that were great, that were really interested, really enthusiastic about it. There was equal amounts of negativity and, this will never work, wasting your time, all this sort of stuff. So, that was fine. And, a little bit the same. I don't think I've had the same sort of negativity as a coach, but there's still the sort of curiosity, as in, like, how have you sort of come to this level and things like that. So it's that, but there's It happens that, Scott Harrington's working here in Norway, and he's worked with clubs in the top league, and Kieran Williams is assistant in the second league at the moment on the men's side as well. So there's a couple of, and all in different sort of areas in Norway. So if you go and meet teams from other places, they might know that there's another British coach somewhere or something. So it's possibly getting a little bit more known.
Do you think that's helped by the fact that you played previously, or do you think the combination of that and the fact that we had, played since you had that initial journey, where there's been an Olympics where there was a Team GB, and we have expanded quite considerably?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange, really. I think I feel probably a great deal more openness to having a British coach and a British player, which I don't know if it's strange or not. It sort of seemed to fit a little bit more that players might you might get the odd good player out of whatever sort of situation if you had some handball going in England, but people seem to be less surprised that you could get a coach from England, in my experience, which I don't know whether that makes sense or not, whether it is a bit that, they start seeing the British teams at some of the youth championships a lot more, or the youth qualifiers, and we've had the Olympics, but it's probably been a little bit easier as a coach, I think.
You're listening to Pitch Talks.
As a former athlete and now a coach, you've probably witnessed quite a lot. And as you were mentioning earlier when we were talking about the Olympics, you've seen, so many incredible things. But what would you say, looking back, is the greatest moment that you've either witnessed or achieved to date?
I mean, as a coach, I think it's something working with some of the youth national teams we had a couple of really good sort of close games against some really sort of big nations, and to be able to kind of work with the players, and they have so many disadvantages in terms of access to training, or the level they can regularly play at, and having to pay to play and pay to go and play for international competitions and things like that. There's so many sort of obstacles that they have. So for them to be able to sort of get them to those competitions, for them to experience that, and for them to have matches or spells where they can really compete with the better nations is pleasing, and I think gives so much sort of hope and inspiration for the future, that if we can sort of bridge some of these gaps, we can then do this on a more regular or more consistent basis. So I think, so in terms of a long-term sort of situation, that's, like I mentioned a bit at the start, that the success of the team at the Olympics was never going to be quantified in the 2 weeks there, but maybe 15, 20 years down the line, when we've got successful British players or British teams or something has come from it. So I think those sort of situations are the most pleasing, because they start to link the two together, or sort of put us on the right pathway, I think, or I hope.
So one final question from me, Mark, is what advice would you give to someone who is looking to pursue a career in not only handball, but or potentially even more so, like yourself, into handball coaching? Is there any advice that you would give them to try and achieve what you've achieved?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to sort of create opportunities for yourself, and to get yourself into different situations, or get exposed to higher level things, or something like this. I think it's, every time I've been sort of moved, I went through the Chinese national team I was with for a bit, and then here to Norway, that you learn so many different things, you get so many different experiences, you get so many, tactical, technical stuff, different cultures, different people, you can learn so much every time. And I think, especially because, to start off in England as well, it would be the same. Go and visit different clubs, go and speak to different coaches, go and try and take as much from them as you can. And then once you've done that, try and go and visit the people in Europe, try and find a connection somewhere where you can go and get more experiences from, people that have done it for 30 years, 40 years, whatever, because, they started playing when they were 5 or 10 instead of 20, or, things like that. It's, from my point, because I was the performance manager for England Handball, and, we were talking a lot about, how we sort of lower our ages. So how can we start with 13-year-olds or 12-year-olds or whatever, and what we might deliver to them, what we hope to coach to them and things like that. And which is great in theory. And I've written stuff, I've read stuff, and all how you might teach these kids or these ages. But it hasn't been until I've come to Norway where I've actually worked and done sessions for 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds. And, that, of course, you can understand all the theory and you do it in practice. It's like, okay, it's, like the boxing, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's the same thing, that you have to do that to have the skills there. But, in the same way, you get being in England isn't, especially for handball, certainly isn't a bad thing, and for coaching, because I remember the first session I had with I think it was the under-13s or whatever. I did a session with here, and the guy who organised it said, he's really sorry there's only 7 kids there or something because half were on a trip or something like this. So that's fine. This is no problem. I've had sessions in England where I've had 1 or 2 or or something like that. So it's not difficult to coach 7 when you've had practice coaching 1 or 2. It's so in the same way it would be good for a coach from England to come here to Norway to see what it's like working with 20 motivated 12-year-old girls who pick handball as their first sport. It also would be equally as enlightening for Norwegian coaches to come over to England to work with 3 in a after school club, 2 of which don't want to be there and the other one doesn't know what handball was. It's all these different experiences, So I think getting as much of that as possible is the most important thing. And of course, if you want to progress through handball at the moment, you have to, or it's important to get some experiences from abroad because it is just on a higher level.
Yeah, Mark, I just want to say as we wrap up another episode, obviously thank you for your time. It's just been really interesting to not only get a new sport on the podcast, but then also, learning about your experiences entering the London 2012 Olympics, which, we don't get the opportunity to speak to many athletes. So being able to hear your stories has been great. And obviously hearing about how it's led you to a coaching role around Europe and what they're doing. And hopefully we can start to see that integrated more in the UK, especially as it seems like it's got a fair balance on boys and girls getting involved in handball as well. So yeah, as I was saying, thank you so much for sharing your stories and coming on to the episode today.
No problem at all. It's been a lot of fun, and I don't know if I made it clear at the start. It's the women's team, the girls team that I'm working with, and the elite team in the city here gets probably as much or more coverage than the elite football team. They're competing for sponsors. It's the one that's on primetime TV. It is the number one. This is a city, and the sport is women's handball. That's the number one, and that's when we talk about the chances to do something, and to when you boil down to physical literacy or physical development in and balancing that up between girls and boys in England, it's it's a huge opportunity for the sport to take that, because there's not many team sports that can do it. So it's good for us to get amongst it, and you can offer professional routes out of it, and coaching and playing. It's when there's not many that can do that.
I just back that up as well, Mark. Having worked within handball, it's one of the most progressive sports, opportunities for women, and it's both women and men are viewed on an equal pedestal, which is it's sort of so more advanced than every other sport going, or most other sports going.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sam. So finally, Mark, thank you once again for joining us on Pitch Talks. It's been fantastic to hear about your experiences and the things you're getting up to. And this is now time for our mid-series break, just in time for Christmas. Thank you so much for listening to Pitch Talks Series 2, and for those who carried on from Series 1. We'll be back in January time with more fantastic stories, great guests, and career advice for how you can get into sport. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bringing You the Game by Pitch Talks. For more information on our latest episodes, careers advice, or to even get involved as a guest, get in touch with the team at mitch@pitch-talks.com. That's mitch@pitch-talks.com, or send us a message on any of our social media platforms. Thanks for tuning in. Bringing you the game. Pitch Talks. All Pitch Talk content is copyright protected. Pitch Talks.